council study session on the solid waste rate study to order at 5:30 on July the 8th. Before we turn it over for the solid waste rate study, at this time, are there any additions or corrections or changes to the regular meeting agenda at 6:30? Hearing none, Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, many of you will recall that in 2019, you authorized conducting a solid waste rate study. That study was performed and recommendations were provided. In 2020, the pandemic struck. And so I made a recommendation that you delay implementation of those rates as recommended in the study. This fiscal year, we included the commercial portion of the rates into the annual operating. Well, last fiscal year now, we included the commercial rates into the annual operating budget. And in this fiscal year, we have proposed including the residential rates that were from the 2019 study. In the interim, I asked Public Works Director Darren Girdler to have the 2019 study updated so that it would be more current. And what you will hear tonight is a presentation from the findings from that updated study. Tonight we have Cynthia Mormile, that is the Senior Project Manager with MSW, that will be presenting to you tonight. Cynthia, Ms. Mormile.
If we could, yeah, thank you.
There you go. Test. All right. Thank you for having us. And I do have a lot of information, and I think you've already received most of it in maybe a lot of detail, but I'll try to go through it. And then if you have questions, obviously happy to answer those. So we are a consulting firm. It's headquartered out of Orlando, Florida. I am from Columbia, Missouri for 50 years. So, well, Northeast Missouri for growing up, but then Columbia, Missouri for over 20 years working with the city. Been with MSW Consultants for the last almost 8 years. So it's good to be back to Missouri always. And I love to talk trash. So next, let's see, forwarding this, go here.
I believe someone is on the way to provide some assistance. Charles?
I'm doing that. So I'll just say a little more about our firm. It's not an engineering firm. We are consultants in operations and management, kind of a unique aspect, but all solid waste focused. So the owners of the company formed it about 20 years ago, looking at a lot of different angles of operations and financial side of solid waste management. So we do waste studies, we do all sorts of auditing, and mostly I work on the operations feasibility studies and cost of service. Basically, from my background, that's what has been the process. Is it this way? Should I try it? There you go. So go back. Okay, thank you. So for just an overview of your system here, and I will say no two systems seem to be alike. I've been in this industry now for 30 years, learned a lot about all different systems while I was at Columbia, learned from others, share with others. That's the best industry networking you have. And then with the MSW Consultants, again, many clients over the course of the years. But for University City, you do have somewhat a full service system in that you do provide the collection from both curbside, residential customers, quite a few commercial customers, and you do recycling, you do yard waste. You have a transfer station so that you can haul it then to the landfill for disposal. So you don't have the processing and disposal side of it within your operation, but you do have a rather full plate of services that you provide in different manners. The recycling drop-off is out at the transfer station. I had to drop by there before I stopped in, just to see a lady putting her recycling out in the rain. I always love it. But then obviously in all systems, you need management of it, which includes supervision on up to people such as Mr. Rose, throughout the department ranks. Part of that goes into the funding of an operation of a system. And you are operating as a utility system enterprise fund, which is also has always been our recommendation. There are some people that operate it fully under general funds. So the collection routes that you have various types of trucks out on the street, you see every day. They're doing carts from the front of the house. Some of them are doing dumpsters from the back of the house. Some of them are doing commercial, the multifamily locations. You have a roll-off that does not have very many containers that it's servicing per year, but it does service the drop-off from the recyclables. So you're taking materials to places for revenue from where people are stopping those off. So the bulk pickup, as you know, is seasonally here, but so the routes is not considered in the routes as a regular system. They do some extras for pay throughout the year, but mostly it's a targeted effort where you have specified crews go out a few weeks in the spring and the fall. Overall, the routing, our comment on that is just it's well balanced. You don't have like so many more routes one day than you have the other. You have a little extra on the one day that you're doing the commercial recycling, but they do other responsibilities throughout the other days of the week. So since the last study, you have had a few challenges. We all have. Pandemic has changed things for the industry throughout the country. And then I understand you had the flood in 2022 and lost a couple trucks. The transfer station had the compactor challenge this last year. I understand that's in process of being replaced, which is great to get them back to rolling, because the dynamics of your trucks having to go to the landfill directly every day is pretty challenging. Adds the time, add the wear and tear on all those smaller trucks. So it's great that transfer station is a good asset you have. Recyclables processing fees, the markets changed in 2018, got a lot of restrictions from the international outlets. And so the recycling firms, as you know, had to start charging to actually stay in business. It's not free service to get these materials clean. So it's easy for your residents to put things in the cart, but it's not always easy for the processor. And it is a business to keep in motion. And we used to use resource management as well. And so when they went out, you had different market dynamics here with, I know Republic Service trying to service many people in the St. Louis area that they didn't have, keep in business and keep people recycling during that challenging market. And that still continues today to some extent. We've had a recovery, but then it goes back. So it is something that they probably will have to maintain that business model going forward. You cannot depend on good markets the whole time. So let's see, historical financial performance. This just takes a look at the last 3 years and then the budgeted before, when we started the study this time to update it. And if you'll notice, you're losing, you have a deficit each year. As Mr. Rose said, we had the pandemic, so it was a delay in things and challenge to just get the materials handled each day. But we were looking at the leaf collection in that last study. And then in this study, they've changed things on the accounting side of things where that was not included in our look. But as you see, it's still at a deficit on the budgeted 2024, just from the increase in the expenses that you've had over that time. And that's without the leaf collection included in. So I'm not sure the transfer in happened in 2023. Finance department would be able to explain that better than me. We use the budget data that we are provided, and I just notated that was a transfer in to get you above the line to probably make up some difference in your reserve fund. So those are the notes for that. The things that we pull together when we're looking at the cost of service, there's a lot of things, including vehicle equipment replacement, which is you've got two really, really important resources to provide refuse materials management, and that would be your people and that will be your equipment. So it's been challenging to keep both of those in place, retained, ordered. People since COVID have had a delay in getting equipment, maybe up to 2 years once you order them. So this is our look at what we would program in as a regular replacement schedule of these vehicles and equipment that are used for your services. And as you can see, the current replacement is about 5.3 million for a 10-year look, but then our project was looking at a 5-year projected period. So keep that in mind as we go forth. But we integrate where the red line is the average over those time periods. So you're a little over 500,000 per year that we put in our cash flow. Actually, the cash outlay is programmed in sort of as the years would indicate. But then when we're doing a test year to see what is your overall cost for the year at hand, we use the average. So the actual would be plugged in the cash flow. So then we look at your fleet before or as we're doing the replacement schedule, and you do have a rather aged fleet. What you would want to see in that third column from the left or the second column from the right is either in the midst of the typical life expectancy, you would expect it to be within there. There's part of them to the higher end, part of them to the lower end if you're doing a regular replacement schedule. But you can see several of your truck types and trailers too are beyond what we would see as a typical life expectancy, and highly recommend you keep those available so that the crews can accomplish what they need to on the daily basis. But we always like to point it out just for consideration that they are more aged than we would see or recommend overall. It is always good to see spares available, but it's not a lot of spares, like 1 out of 12, but your road tractors are not daily use, 1 out of 2, but it's 12-year expectancy. So you do have several that are on the overextended age period. So I know you were able to get a couple replacements following that flood. So that was good. That hopefully the insurance was helpful there. But the only capital improvement part that we had in the building blocks over the 10 years was the replacement of the transfer station compactor. So that is a very good, important asset. And I think it's in place on this year's budget or in process of order, or not sure the status since we've worked on this for a few months. But we use in our cash flow, we use a 3% CPI per year as in the cost of things. So we look at the budget you've got for 2024, accelerate that 3%. 2 or 3 years ago, 3% wasn't even catching it. So the 3% is sort of leveled out. And then we use the 10-year average again for establishing the current cost of your operation. And that was the 29,000, but it's really hitting your cash flow on year run. So it will be the only thing that capital improvement that was included, and it will hit year one. So it's a little different than when we're using the average to figure up the rates. So the next slide shows the test year, which I've been saying, this is how we put together the 10-year average goes in there rather than the actual cash flow on that year. We tie that in with the budget, looking at the acceleration for CPI, looking at your growth, which is, I think, just a barely, maybe a small negative % rather than a high growth rate. And then it turns out that you've got management and administration includes everything from mostly the salaries, but then there's some supplies that would be associated with management, maybe a couple of vehicles, trucks, something for supervisors, but you do have supervisor, crew leader, superintendent in your staffing. And then the other services, as you can see, refuse would be all the kind of gold natured cells, the 3 that go together: bulky waste, dumpster refuse, and carts. Yard waste, just the green slice, and that does not include the leaves. And then recycling, all those blue, including recycling drop off, dumpster recycling, cart collection, and the transfer station itself. And the transfer station is only used to get the refuse out to the landfill. They do run the trucks for the recycling directly to the MRF from my understanding. So, well, let's see, back it up. The bottom right table shows you overall the current revenues at the current rate that you would need to be recovering the total full cost. Right now come up about 3.2 million, and the full cost, putting all these together for your current test year would be about 3.7 million. So it's about a 13% deficit when you look at it as a whole. Let's see. Then this one breaks it down a little more into residential versus commercial and facilities. So your only facilities, again, are the transfer station and the recycling drop off. And then obviously this kind of shows the overwhelming percent that your residential services are out of your entire system. So this is a good example of the proportion that the residential services play. We look at this from our typical format. These last two slides were how we had presented things in 2018 to you, but this is when we start out with a boring table before we making the better graphs about it. But this just shows by line of service. So you've got cart collection and for recycling and refuse, but then you also have dumpster refuse because they do have a lot of homes using the dumpsters in the alleys behind their homes. So in the method of figuring out what does it actually cost, we start with the truck and the person running for each of the types of service. Then we have to back that into how many people do you have paying for that type of service. So this is our first step, is to bring all those things, vehicle replacement, your staffing, how many people are in each route for each type of service, into this table format. And then when we back it out, the management administration gets allocated throughout all the other services. That's the far right column, annual revenue need, when the administration is spread across all the other services. And at that point, we had also allocated the transfer station and the container maintenance because they did not have revenue associated with those at the time, and they are supporting the other services. So the transfer station then goes back into the refuse on the far right column, and container maintenance, those that have dumpster or carts. Let's see if I'm not the right one. Transfer. All right. So this just sort of summarizes your tonnage, where it's going, and what the current disposal cost was at the point we were digging into these details. So everything's either going to Champ landfill from your transfer station, or I know this winter they were driving directly there with their trucks for a while, but I think it was back to using transfer station the last I knew, and Republic Services MRF, and then your composting City Park, where they come and pick it up from St. Louis Composting throughout the year periodically. But you can see the disposal cost per ton was up to $60.17, and I imagine that probably went up maybe in July. Had a periodic annual escalator to it, but the Republic Services at the time we were looking at all the details for the last 6 months had averaged $111 per ton. And the transfer station, when we looked at just the cost of operating that with the staff and the trailers, trucks, that was about $26.83, which would go back into the rates being in addition to the $60.17 on the refuse. So those are all components that then come back in to the different customers that use those lines of service. So then we get looking at residential, the full cost rate building blocks. So this is just the different aspect of refuse. You've got some with 60-gallon carts out there. You have a lot with 90-gallon carts. You have some with recycling carts. There are a few with the dumpsters, if it's the 3+ unit, that have dumpsters for recycling. But a lot of the alley homes have got the dumpster and then a recycling cart. So they are not going for so these are just the building blocks from after we start with the truck type, person, and type of service, coming back to the full cost based on how many actual billing determinants or accounts you have using each of these components. Yard waste, we have actually split the collection cost versus the sticker cost out into the yard waste being a cost for each home, just for that truck to run around all households throughout the week. And then you'll see in a little later point, the sticker cost would be covering the disposal for those that elect to buy the stickers and set out material. But I understand that's not required in certain times of the year, but we have the number of stickers that you've sold for a recent year that breaks into the disposal. So then bulk waste, to be able to cover your systems throughout the year, $1.26 per account. And then the recycling drop off breaks back in because everyone has that at their excess, only 69 cents per household or unit in the case of the multi-unit locations. So you can see the breakdown there. You would expect to have a little more cost for 90-gallon cart than 60 just because of the disposal aspect. We break it back down into the volume and pull it out that direction. The dumpster refuse is a little higher, but not double higher than the cart, but it's higher because they're going twice a week to get the dumpster through those alleys to be able to keep up with the input into them. So after you take all the building blocks, put them together, this left-hand column shows your different billing types that you have right now. So you would have the single family 90-gallon refuse and recycling cart once a week. That's the top row. And again, I point out almost 8,400 people using that service is it's the majority of your users. And the full cost rate, we have broken it into monthly just because that's the way we compare. So you get people back onto apples to apples when you look at the other communities, a monthly cost, monthly cycle on your utilities and things. So, but I do know you bill twice a year. So there's a percent of about 4% difference in that primary top row, but you can see the difference as you go down. For some reason, which we are not sure why, but the two family locations, you do bill each unit the amount, but they are billed at a little higher amount. So we were confirmed that, both units are billed to that account. So you would have 2 times the 126.30 every twice a year. But again, you see the number of billing units is only 8 for that. So it's not a significant number of accounts that have got the 2 people per account using the 2 family rates that you have. And again, there's a senior, the discounted or smaller cart and smaller discounted senior user for both the dumpster and the cart there. And so a lot of numbers, I'm sorry, it's a lot of detail, but this is when you put all those different building blocks that we had on the slide before, come up to these full costs. And then in the later part of our presentation, we talk about recommended rates for that. But right now we're just identifying what are these current versus the full cost. So if you look at commercial refuse, your 6-month rates are as the top chart shows and the bottom. And what it shows us is that there's sort of some imbalance there because the cost is established based on how much cost to take your truck by. So that would be consistent, whatever the cart or the dumpster size is each time, but then the volume that goes into it, you've got to pay the disposal or whether it's the processing for recycling. So there are currently, your current rates may be a bit higher than we found the full cost to be for the smaller size, but not in all cases as you go across to the different frequencies and size. So there are certain sizes and frequencies that you don't offer. So we've just included those that you have. So it's a little falling under about 10,000 on the annual revenue. That's commercial refuse. But if you look at the commercial recycling, I do believe when you first got those recycling dumpsters for commercial, might have been a grant. And back then you could either break even or you're getting money from your recycling. So at that point, no rates were charged. Those containers were a blessing to have, an option of recycling down on, I think, on the loop. And but really their full cost rates have changed a lot since that time. And so you're not recovering any of the revenue of the almost 48,000 that the commercial recycling is costing you. So our overall cost of service findings, the allocated full cost is up, as most costs are, since 2018. And this is even without the leaf collection. It's still up, a couple $100,000 without that difference of the leaf collection being in there. The residential collection, whether from curbside or dumpster, is the predominant service line with which to recover your revenue. Commercial garbage rates are out of balance a little. And the commercial recycling has been fully subsidized by commercial garbage rates in the past, or other budgetary transfers like general funds or other ways that you're supporting the recycling and diversion here. Roll-off has a very small customer base. Flat rate includes the placement and one service. I think later point out there may be 30 pools in this last year that were reported. And the tonnage that was reported from those about 4.8 tons per service. And they're not billing per ton. And that's a pretty good average for a roll-off. You know, it's roofing or some kind of remodeling someone's using the dumpster for. So it's a minimally used service and is a money loser currently, even though they need the roll-off to be able to service their drop-off. So I know at the last study, it was maybe a little closer, and we were saying maybe get some more roll-off containers if you have the staffing to provide that service. But that right now, it sounds like they have continued with the same process, and they have a flat rate. It's probably easier than having to weigh and then bill that direction, but maybe we'll get into the recommended rate. It's quite a bit higher than what they're charging right now. So when we do the rate design, we kind of look at what we would suggest right now. And then in our cash flow dashboard, we have each year we can tie in the equipment replacement, we tie in the expected growth in cost, which as I mentioned, was 3%. And then you can actually program in whether you would be adding a CPI increase to keep your cash reserve in place met during that time. So you've got I think it was 18% on an annual basis of your operating expenses. So that's not a real aggressive required reserve, but to meet the 18%, we look at that bottom line on the cash flow and what would be, how often you would need the rates, along with maybe not having that much up front, but then knowing that you would need to also have a CPI increase in a certain years as we go out. So with the residential rates first, 1 and 2 family collections, the current 2 family rates are higher than the 1 family rates, like I mentioned, but you do have very few accounts that are at that rate, but we do recommend that they would be on the same, since each family receives the services. We confirm that they each have a cart. They're each getting the same level of service. It just happens to be the location type of a building, and that each account is billed for 2 families. So we're proposing that the rate path be to make that the same as the 1 family rates, and then 8.5% increase in year 1, which sounds like a lot increase, with the exception of equilibrating the 2 family rate to be the same as the 1. So 8.5%, but as you mentioned earlier, had not increased them over the past few years just because of the other challenges at hand economically and in life, COVID. So residential rates continued. It's the multifamily dumpster service is at a significant deficit for that twice-a-week collection. And so even raising that 40% is still less than the full cost. If they could do that to the full cost, it would sound even higher, but it's less than the 1 and 2 family rates still if you're increasing at 40%. So I'll show the numbers here shortly. The 3+ unit multifamily 90-gallon cart, similar to the curbside cart customers because of the cost of taking the truck to the locations that have the 90-gallon cart, but reasonably it would be somewhat less, since emptying multiple, if you had locations that had 10 or 15, however many carts there, they can do it without having to move on further. So there's a little bit of savings, but the exact number at how many locations was not available. Like, we don't go count at each stop on their routes. So we would just propose that align it with the 1 and 2 family rates, slight reduction in the current rate actually. So the way it is on your rate structure currently, this would actually be a slight decrease for those. So here they are when all put together for the single family refuse. If you got the larger cart, once a week service for both those and the recycling cart, $19.91 recommended. It's an 8.5% increase, as I mentioned earlier. Get the 2 family, few customers on that on the same rate per unit, so that it would be similar. And then the single and two family 60 gallon is slightly lower just due to the cost of the volume difference, third difference in the volume. The alley dumpster refuse, they're getting twice a week service so that the cost of that is higher. And they have a cart for recycling. So that's a recommendation of a consistent 8.5 to align with the single family cart rate. And dumpster and refuse with the senior rates, same thing with the increase there. The mechanical ones, like I said, 40% increase would still keep it below what the single family structures are paying, and they do have the cost involved with it by coming twice a week. It's lower than the Allard dumpster refuse because you probably have a lot more units right at the same location using those dumpsters. So if the 3+ units are using the 90-gallon cart and the recycling cart, we recommend that be the same as the single family. And then to maintain that cash flow, meeting your cash reserve in the 5-year rate path, you needed a 3% CPI escalation in year 3 and 4. So these increases would be effective year 1. It would be able to skip a year from no increase and then expected a 3% CPI in year 3 and 4. And I would, you could always look at it after the first and the second year out. Do we still need this? Maybe things really improve with the costs we've been seeing and things of that nature. But that is how we come together with a residential rate path. Other residential considerations would be the drop-off recycling at the transfer station is recovered through all the residential rates, which that's where it's tied into now. The yard waste sticker program, as I mentioned, the cost of running the truck has been covered in the baseline, those rates that I just mentioned for each household that would be eligible for the yard waste collection, but then the disposal cost being covered through the sticker sales. So you have the opportunity to put materials out, but if you don't have the stickers to go on the bags, you're not then assessed the additional cost of disposal. So you're sort of paying proportionate to the number of stickers that are sold throughout the year here. But again, we recommend that be increased a little bit to $1.60 per sticker for those that are sold. Again, the CPI escalation in years 3 and 4 would be required in addition to those. So I'm trying not to keep that a secret, or expectation would be, like this, instead of going up a full rate that would cover you the whole 5 years, trying to stabilize and step it in as you need for the cash outlay. Okay, so how does this measure up with other residential communities? We did look at the same communities that we had benchmarked for you in the 2018-2019 study. And you can see the top row is what we found in 2018. And the next row is what we found this time. And it looks like everyone except for Baldwin has raised their rate. And the Brentwood is the outlier in this group, and that they seem to cover it through their tax general fund from their taxes. So everyone else seems to operate as a user pay system, and they have all increased since the last study. And the periodic, these are all put on a monthly basis. Even Clayton, I had to go really look that one to say, really? It's a really big increase, but it was very prevalent on their website. So not a thing. But the 3 on the left, Kirkwood, St. Peter's, and then Brentwood are all providing public service for your citizens rather than the contracting of the collection. So. So if I look at the commercial rate considerations, this actually captures the number of accounts. They're not significant in the realm of a commercial collection in a lot of cities. So like you saw, the chunk of commercial was not nearly as big of a revenue contributor or cost cover as the residential accounts, but 60 refuse accounts, 14 commercial dumpsters. The refuse rates overall, I told you they're not balanced throughout there, but when you look at it all, it's 17.4% deficit, and the imbalance of the structure, depending on the size and the service frequency, were a little apparent. But you know, you've been, the recycling service been free, but it's not really free if it's a net cost to you. And it has been for several years. So the market challenges that have set in since 2018 have been significant in that, as well as the being able to replace trucks, the accelerating cost of trucks, fuel, staffing, all of the costs together. So options we see are to continue to service this commercial line and just increase the rates. We don't usually recommend subsidizing commercial collections at all through your other funds, or especially not off of your residential rates. So proposed, it's pretty varied based on that rate matrix that I showed you, as far as 10% increase to 68 to try to compensate for the imbalance there is, and then 80% recycling rates as a percent of a refuse. It still incentivizes recycling. It's going to cost less, but it's going to help you cover the cost. So when we put those two together, if you would, and you could implement commercial recycling rates just at a discounted rate from the garbage. In addition to this one, we also say the 3% increase in year 3 and 4, similar to the residential. You could choose to privatize the commercial sanitation collection completely, you know, out of that service, or you can continue subsidizing, which is the case currently. And the roll-off rate, as I mentioned, very few services per year, but pretty high average tonnage based on the data that we were provided. And so looking at the cost, I mean, current rate is 300, and they have a cost of 327 just for the pool because there's so few and how many days that they are running out to take one. If they were to, we recommend usually to add the disposal charge for actual per ton, $60.17 is what it would be normally or currently. But then if you're not charging that separately to avoid to having to scale and have a different billing system for that, you're going to be looking at $616 per pool as a cost. So proposed rate, you bring up your pool fee to cover the cost of the pool, but then also add the tip fee on some way if it's feasible billing wise. I know that could be the challenge with it, but 10% increase on the pool fee for that seems to be a matter of fact that people might be waiting for them, wishing you had more to do, but that's probably because of the fee is not maybe what would compare to a private roll-off collection, which we did not benchmark that, so I'm not sure what it would be. Recommend recovering the cost by rates or do not offer the roll-off service out there at all. The staff is doing that in addition to other duties like servicing your drop-off and maybe running transfer trailer, different other tasks. So I'm sure they could utilize them for those, and it wouldn't be a loss of someone not having something to do if you did not offer that service. But that's definitely your decision. Operations weigh in. So in summary, the solid waste services are critical. I think you all know that, for maintaining a healthy standard of living. It's one of the things after working 20 years, 30 years now in public works, you don't always, that crew do not always get the kudos that they should for that service, because they're going to be collecting in the storms. They're going to be doing whatever to finish that route for the day. That maybe driving somebody else's route if he's sick for the day. It's really challenging, but the rising cost of labor, equipment, fuel, disposal, processing, everything in the last few years has resulted in the full cost being quite a bit more than the current rate revenue. And so rate increases are required to maintain the financial health of the enterprise for the future. I mean, some things people look at are every other week recycling. I don't think that's allowed for the county, is it? I'm not sure. I know we've looked before for you, the cost savings you might have if you remove glass from the curbside, which that is not allowed by the county either, I guess, if without some kind of exemption. But there are different ways maybe to try to I guess, move forward with some cost saving measures if they can be approved by the county in addition to the city, the way I understand it. But those are all thoughts and the findings of our study. For now, we're available to keep updating as needed or help out if needed for the task force answering your questions if I can right now, or taking them down and getting back to you if it's more specific than what I've got off my head, but that's what I've got.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Rose, do you have any questions or can I open it up to council? Okay, we've only got 20 minutes. We have some questions, so, okay.
They're going to be real quick. There are three areas. I want to ensure that the study actually loads in all of the costs associated with solid waste, that entire operation. And historically, leaf collection has been up under that. So I'd like for that to be included. Also, fleet maintenance. I didn't see where that was included, and certainly there is a percentage cost that is incurred by fleet that should be loaded into this study as well. And the final one is the yard waste stickers. I'm wondering if you incorporate those into the rate, what would the rate look like? So those are the three areas that I would ask to revisit and update the study to reflect what the rates would be with those included.
Okay, I can confirm the fleet maintenance is in there in your operational costs, just based on what we use from before. Again, we can go back and put the leaf collection in there. We may need more data from the operations to include that.
Thank you. Are there questions from members of council for Ms. Moormeal? Mr. Clay.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Thank you, Ms. Moormeal, for your presentation. So I'll, given time is of the essence, I'll go in kind of shotgun fashion. So not trying to be rude or pepper you, but just going quickly to give my colleagues an opportunity to ask questions. Do we know when the last time rates were increased?
I do not. I had the rate from 2018 from your residential rate being the same as it is for this study. So were you saying that it's proposed to be increased this year?
Mayor, Councilmember Clay, the rates were commercial side was increased last fiscal year. So fiscal year 24, the residential is included or proposed in this fiscal year, but those are still from the 2019 study, which is very outdated.
Okay, so
No, but
2019 was the last time, is that?
His question was, when was the last time we increased our rates on residents?
Yes.
And I don't know the answer.
The council passed an ordinance on September 26, 2023, increasing all rates except for single family units.
Right, which is residential, which that's.
Yeah, but I got that. But yeah, he wants to know that big exception that was there.
It goes, it was prior to 2016.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we can get a date for you.
Okay.
I just don't have that.
I think that'll be
information.
helpful for the public to understand that, you know, this conversation is not one that's been had for perhaps more than a decade. Okay, let's see. Management, management administrative costs. So that's where the people reside, not they aren't necessarily in the other areas.
The supervisory, so you have supervisor, crew leader, superintendent, so they may go in any day's time to various operations. They are like at 100% charge to administration, and then we allocate it back, but also partial. I think someone from finance that's partially involved with the billing and things like that, administrative support staff. There are a list of those as well. So that all goes in there, and then we prorate them back based on the percent of the cost without the management and admin in it.
Okay. To CPI cost. So the proposal is a rate increase year one, nothing happens year two, and then 3 and 4, something kicks in, CPI increase. And that's kind of as far out as you've.
Well, we looked at the scope was to look at it for a 5-year period because we always recommend updating it at least that often, if not by 3. But yes, for that cash flow to not go in the red on your reserve target, it was necessary on years 3 and 4.
Okay, and just a couple more. So the bottom line, if someone's listening and it seems like most of our families are the single family, 2 carts. We do have some dumpster. We know in the 3rd ward, we do have folks who do utilize dumpsters, but we would be looking at an increase of, I can't remember, I don't know what of
Eight and a- 8.5%, I
1835
think.
today. 1835 today to
To 1991, I believe it was 8.5%.
1991.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the vast majority of folks, we're looking at 1835 to 1991.
Yep.
Would be the difference in their month, is that monthly?
Well, they bill twice a year, so the total would be 119.46 for this
119.
twice. a
Okay.
year.
Okay, and finally, uh, some years ago, my predecessor, Byron Price, I believe engaged in a conversation about monetizing. I want to say our transfer station, maybe I'm using the wrong terminology, but it seems like we have a revenue issue here, and it seems like there was some conversation. I don't know where it went. I'm not expecting you to know it, but I don't know if Mr. Rose is familiar with it. Evelyn Shields was involved. There was some conversation about this. Not necessarily looking for an answer now, but there was some. Again, the idea was, I guess we have a unique setup among municipalities, of course.
With the transfer station, yeah.
Yeah, most are smaller than us. I mean,
Well,
so
we looked at it even in the 2019 study, and it's a very good asset that you have, like I mentioned, and you have capacity with your trucks and your trailers and just the people there to accept it from public. And I believe they used to. They had some issues where they were putting in a different access road, I believe, about 2020, or they had it in the CIP plan. So then I don't know what happened from that point to this year, but I know they just have never reopened the.
well, I think it was a flood.
But it was, yeah, it was recommended, but I don't know if they got the access road put in or if priorities changed with the dollars when COVID hit. You may have needed to use
Yeah,
that
that too.
elsewhere.
So I'm wondering if that can be explored, because it seems like there was some energy around it and some possibility associated with it, and we need revenue. So there we go.
Because everyone else probably paying close to the same, if not on the contract for the $60.17 disposal, but then you would be able to charge them whatever fee per ton for your transfer of it. So that it is definitely there. I know it was addressed in the previous study as a recommendation, but some things can't happen.
I
with
thought it
all-
was something about us allowing other communities or us using our transfer station for other communities, I think is what the history is of that one. Other questions? Mr. Smotherson?
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Yeah, and I would agree with the mayor in that there was a more recent discussion about that transfer station and having other communities use that. So again, I don't know how we dropped the ball on that, but again, I'm hoping that that is something that we do pick up. But the one question that I do have, and I do appreciate you for your this report. And what I will ask is how close on the page that you have residential rates, benchmark and communities, and just to kind of understand how close is the services that Kirkwood provides and the services that St. Anne provides, since they are public like ours, but how closely are they full service like ours, and are they similar? And and I just want to kind of understand, because I see that we have a lower rate, but again, what services are they providing? That if we could understand, just to make sure that it's similar and we're making similar comparisons.
So we do have additional details. It's just hard to put everything in the things. You see the little table, it
Sure.
would not look very good on the slide, but so twice a week, it showed twice a week collection for the frequency in St. Peter's in our research. So that's a little more for there. The Kirkwood looked like automated collection of 65 or 95 gallon carts weekly on the recycling, but maybe a 64 gallon cart. That's what we found. And they were similar or otherwise to everything, but did not say separate leaf collection. So I don't know if that's our findings. And then we try to look back through it and see if it's anything stands out as separate. But if any of you live there and you know differently, feel free to correct us there. But so yeah, St. Peter's is the one that showed twice a week would be the big difference in that. And then but they also have their own facility as well, right? And they process the recycling, so they have different outlet for it. Same, not sure where their waste goes after they take it in, where they transfer it, but assuming they have contracts similar. Did that answer? It's the ones that's. the
Right, to a
ones that-
certain degree. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. But if you can find out any more details about that, you can just pass that along.
Baldwin still says, well, it didn't increase its rate either, but they were already higher than you. It just say, weekly and 3 sizes of carts, on both trash and recycling, single stream. Everyone has single stream recycling. Everyone has automated collection except for Clayton and Brentwood was still saying, manual, which not sure if that's the current thing with the contracted, collection maybe, but. mm.
Are there other questions from members of council? I know that Mr. Clay has other questions, as do I. You wanting to?
I have an
jump in?
answer to Mr. Clay's question now, if you like it, Mayor,
Okay,
on
please.
this last increase.
Yeah.
It's September 1st, 2016 fee increase, and then before that, September 1st, 2009.
Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this presentation. Is there any consideration to what the cost would be if we eliminated the sticker system? How much increase would that be on the monthly rate, or has that been considered?
We can look at it, and Mr. Rose, I think that was his question as well, to go ahead and tie it in, as well as the leaf collection being paid with that rather than, I think when we were told that it was no longer included, maybe it was more of a general service something, but we'll put it in. We know what it was on your budget, and then we'll also put the yard waste sticker back in.
If I could, I have a couple of, maybe this is a simple question that you could explain. On page 16, you have 2-family 90-gallon refuse and recycling 1 time per week of 8 units, and then 2-family twice per week of 7 units. How does that, I don't even know what that, I hate to be slow here, but I don't know what that means. We have nine duplexes,
So
7 duplexes.
it's the number of accounts that we were told are being billed to family, but they also said we are billing both families that amount, the 126.30 and the 135.
I get, yeah, but we have duplexes up one side down, the other around the corner. So I'm just trying to figure out what 9 and 7 really mean as compared to the number of duplexes we have in University City. Am I just off base that this is duplexes?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I mean, no, and by the way, this isn't towards you. I'm just saying to
No, no.
somebody.
Yeah, I'm saying,
Those numbers don't make sense. The number of rental units that we have in University City, in particular, the number of duplexes, particularly in the second ward, and then some in the third, I think, even in the first as well, that doesn't make sense. So that's that question. And then I'm going to roll of questions that I don't understand. And that the next one was a phrase I did not understand. This is on page 22, multi-unit, multi-family mechanical dumpster. What's a multi-family mechanical dumpster? Is that just a dumpster that has a
Yeah.
side loader?
instead of a roll cart. Yep.
Okay, okay. All right. Okay with that one. I do appreciate, by the way, the questions about the yard waste and the stickers. I would wholeheartedly be in support of getting rid of the stickers and adding it to the bill. That would be clearly one that I would like. And then the next question I would ask, and this may be for the city manager or for the city attorney, but can we pass if we pass a rate increase, can we have it with regular adjustments for cost of living without us having to vote every year? Or is it every year we have to vote? And I'm not afraid to take the vote. It's just if we're doing this and we've got a CPI adjustment, can the ordinance be written that it goes with CPI?
Yes, I think you could build that into the ordinance if the council desires to do that.
And then Mr. Clay has a question. My last one is, as you look through this, are there any other services that we, I hate to use the word, but I'll say it, can eliminate that would make sense for us? Because at some point in time, you have to ask yourself a question. Do we provide all the services that we provide? It doesn't mean we're going to eliminate them, but I think we have to ask the question. Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
As Mr. Rose had mentioned about moving leaf collection back into the analysis, I would also want to see if the numbers related to the other municipalities, if they do provide leaf collection. Because it looks like if we're ballparking leaf collection, it looked like early in the presentation was about 400,000 and we divide that by the total number of billing units, which I think is about 14,500. It's about a $28 service that we would be providing to across the billing units. So is that, if we're just, and I'm just ballparking it, is that a service, is that a value to our, it's, if that would cover the cost, is that a value that our residents, even if, you know, I know we'd have people complaining, you know, I don't have as much leads as whatever, but you know, that's how these things all work, but I'd want to see how, if that's what we're looking at, if we bring that back in, and it would seem that if that was the number, if that number wasn't included, it's almost like we were given that value. Prior years, if this was the rates, it was almost free. We were I mean, for the last 5 years, we were given free leaf collection, if I'm reading this right.
Well, it was part of the, probably the deficit that you were incurring was between 850 and almost $1 million for 2021, 2022. And that did include the, leaf collection cost of 400 to 500,000. So it's part of the deficit, I'm assuming, in the rates, but it's continues to grow as costs go up. So, but we can put it back in there and do a new rate, say what's the new rate. I did show on the research that said Kirkwood did not have a separate leaf collection. It might be within their rate, and also Florissant. Everyone else's was separate, but
Mr. Clay.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Crow. In looking at your proposed residential rates, I want to focus on the senior rate. Is, if I'm looking at this correctly, and I may not be on the right thing, but okay, here, I'm looking at this correctly. Okay, the senior rate, they're about 1,000. Am I correct that they're about 1,300 regular, with the roll of the bins, 1,396 senior rate payers? Is that correct?
I see 1396 for the 60-gallon refuse. So whether do you allow other people to have the smaller ones than a senior? I'm not sure, but that's 1,400 there. And then there's also the senior ratepayer, 125 using the dumpster.
Yeah,
out-
using
out.
using the dumpster. Okay, and so, and just to confirm, we're talking about an increase across the board, but by and large, our seniors are going up at the same rate as everyone else at this 8.5%, correct?
Yes, I believe.
Okay, but they are still below the regular, rate,
Yes,
assuming they have a 60-gallon.
below the
okay.
90-gallon rate.
Yeah, they're below the 90-gallon rate. Okay, I just want to confirm that. And I am curious, we don't need necessarily do this now, what Florissant is or is not doing at $15.50. That almost seems like you get kind of a Oscar the Grouch style tin can, and that's pretty much your service. It's significantly cheaper, so I'd just be curious what they are doing or not doing.
Well, I show that they are under a contract for the collection, so that may be part of it, but has that been negotiated for years? Clayton says contracted collection as well, and they are up to $53. So could be depending on the term of the contract, how long.
Mr. Smotherson.
Yeah, I do apologize. I'll be very quick. Mr. Rose, is there a way to consider having the consultants look at monetizing mulch? And the only reason I say that is because the free mulch is great, but we're getting taken advantage of in reference to that free mulch. And so I'll quickly say that because I've seen contractors literally with trailers in Heman Park collecting mulch and filling those trailers with mulch. So just a quick question, if you could add that to it.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Stevie. We haven't had this many questions in a long time, so you piqued our interest. So
Thank
safe
you all.
travels back tonight.
Thank you.
Are we able to keep moving, folks, or no?
Mayor, my intention, as you can tell, it's a significant amount of information, details that are involved in potential increase in rates. And so it's my intention to make a recommendation that you approve a resolution that would allow you to appoint a task force that could dig into the details of the proposed rates as well as the services that are provided. And make a independent recommendation to you in addition to a staff's recommendation.
All right, with that in mind, we will probably start the 6:30 meeting around 6:35. And so if we'll give everybody about a 5-minute break and then we'll come back in.